So you're telling me in 2025, South Park made an episode that feels like it's from the golden era? There's no way. Well, South Park Season 28, Episode 4 did just that. Honestly, compared to the rest of the season's episodes, it doesn't even feel like an episode of modern South Park. And I mean that in the best way possible. I've got so much I want to talk about for this episode, and I really want to break it down to show why this episode, compared to the rest of the season, feels so unique and so much more like classic South Park than what we've gotten the rest of the year. I'm not going to bother breaking down the episode because every other South Park YouTuber has already done that, and I'm not trying to make the exact same video. So if you want to hear a summary or a recap of the episode, go watch that. But anyways, let's get into the breakdown. Starting off with the writing, classic South Park episodes have a very distinct style of writing. They usually have an A and a B plot that are both going on in parallel throughout the episode that come together at the end via a common plot point or theme. All the best episodes of the show follow this kind of structure. One of the main problems with this season I've seen so far is that with each episode, it feels like there's too much going on. There's too many plot points they're trying to juggle and fit within 20 minutes, and each one feels underdeveloped and rushed, leaving the ending unsatisfying every single time. Most episodes have had at least 3 plot points running together, and in 20 minutes, every scene is super important. The more scenes you can give one plot point, the more developed it will be. When you're trying to run 3 plot points, that gives each story only about 7 minutes of screen time, versus when you have 2 plot points, each story gets about 10 minutes of screen time. That 3 extra minutes really adds up and can give so much more depth to each scene. In this episode, they did beautifully with only having 2 plot points. One being the boys trying to win the race, and the other, the cops and Pete Hegseth. This allowed each story to fully develop and get the time it needed throughout the 20-minute span without feeling rushed. I mean, this one's kind of obvious. Focus on the main boys. I don't think we've had an episode this season that's had all 4 of the main characters doing something together. We have had episodes with all 4 of them at once that have been involved in the plot, but never with them trying to do one common thing together. These kid-centric stories are what makes South Park feel special. I know you can't always do them because it'll get boring, but come on, we've gone 8 episodes and we haven't had a single one yet. This is the biggest thing that makes it feel like a classic South Park episode. The story was also really self-contained for the most part. Besides the opening motivation for bringing Pete Hegseth into it, this story was really isolated from the rest of the season. And this is a big staple of classic South Park episodes. Isolated 20-minute stories that don't really need context from the rest of the show to understand what's going on. These self-contained 20-minute adventures are ones that you can just pick up, watch, and not have to worry about knowing the larger context in. That's classic South Park. And I don't mind these serialized stories in South Park at all. I think some of them have been fantastic. Season 19 is one of my favorite seasons of the entire show. But a true classic South Park episode is one that contains these isolated 20-minute adventures. A few years down the line, if I want to rewatch anything from season 27, this will probably be the episode that I'd gravitate towards. This touches a little more on the writing, but one of the big things people have said about modern South Park is it feels too political. The politics of South Park is a very fine line. They've always had politics be part of their episodes, and it's a big part of who they are. But a lot of the best South Park episodes are ones where the focus is just on the South Park characters, rather than focusing on being a critique on the real world. A lot of the best South Park episodes you can watch without having to understand the context of the real world politics to enjoy. But a lot of modern episodes feel like if you don't know what's going on in the current day of politics, you're not going to be able to understand the jokes in the episode. And that kind of detracts from the quality and the rewatchability of these episodes. In this episode, you don't really need to know what's going on in Saudi Arabia to follow along in the plot. Saudi Arabia is just a plot device that they use here to accelerate the main plot forward, rather than being the entire plot itself. You don't even need to understand what Cartman and Token are debating about to enjoy the episode, because that's not what the center of the story is. The story is about them trying to win the race, rather than what Saudi Arabia is doing. And the politics just happens to be a part of that story. South Park is better when the politics add to the story, rather than the story being derived from the politics. When you can watch an episode without needing to know the politics and still enjoy it, that's what makes a good episode of South Park that has politics in it. If you need to fully understand what's going on in the real world, what's going on in the current climate of politics, to understand the story and what the characters are doing, that's when South Park starts to feel overly political. And I feel like that's what's been plaguing the show for the last little while. especially this season. If you're not familiar with anything that's going on in the current US administration, a lot of the Trump stuff is going right over your head, and you won't be able to enjoy that half of the show. The show is better when the story isn't driven by the politics, rather the politics are just a part of the story. In this episode, for example, you could have taken out Saudi Arabia entirely and replaced it with some other entity that's controversial in sponsoring the race. And Cartman and Token's ethical dilemma works the exact same way, and the episode still plays out the exact same. The episode doesn't need Saudi Arabia for the plot, rather, the Saudi Arabia just adds to the plot. But all in all, I think this combination of more tight-knit writing, focus on the main boys, and politics being secondary to the story is what really elevated this episode above the rest of the season. And it honestly feels like a disgrace to this episode to jumble it with the rest of the season. I know it's going to suffer the fate of being jumbled in with the rest of season 27, season 28, whatever you want to call it. This episode will probably end up going under the radar, which is so unfortunate because this is the best one they've put out so far this year. A true modern day classic episode of South Park. But that's all I have for this video. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, like, subscribe. I appreciate it. Take care.